What's up, guys? So today I've got a crazy and wild story for you. So I've been on a quest to find my son his first car, and I went deep down a rabbit hole in this situation way further than I ever thought was possible. And today I'm going to tell you that story, and hopefully maybe you guys have some insight. Maybe somebody has some theories that, I hadn't thought of yet. We have some theories, and we're still working through them. And honestly, the story is still unfolding as this video is being made. But in the meantime, let's talk about you guys and what you can do for me. If you guys could possibly make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, ring that bell, leave some comments, all those things, because it really helps out the channel. I'm getting really close to 1,000 subscribers, and it'd really help out if you could do that for me. But let's get to this story. Okay, so here's some of the backstory. So my son, his name's Braden, and he's going to be turning 16 in September. Currently it's July, so it's coming up pretty quick. So basically, last year, right before Christmas time, I wasn't really sure what to get him for Christmas, and my friend Joe, who you'll see in this video later, he came up with this Honda Accord that he had, and he had asked me if I wanted to buy it for my son, and I was like, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. I could just get it for him for Christmas, we could fix it up, and that could be his first car. So this is the car, this is the original car, right? So I picked up this 04 Honda Accord, and the fender was all messed up, the bumper was messed up, and it needed some work. It needed a clutch, it needed tires, all those things. So since then, I put tires on it, I put the clutch in it, and I had picked up a parts car. And the reason I picked up a parts car was because my neighbor had hit the driver's door while it was sitting in the streets. So now it has a black door on it. None of this is really important, other than the fact that now you know what the car is and the situation on that one. So that Honda Accord, we had been fixing it up. I had my son, I had him help me with it, and we worked on stuff, and we, tore down the other car. Well, I had kind of got the hint early on that he wasn't really enthused about the car. He was enthused that he got a car, but he didn't really like the car, and I think he was kind of afraid to tell me that, and that's fine. And he wasn't super excited about it. And I get it, because if somebody got me a Honda Accord, I'd be excited that, they gave me a car, but, it is just a Honda Accord. It's not the coolest thing in the world, and it's a little bit rough around the edges, even though, we were going to paint it and we were going to fix it up. So, fast forward to last week sometime, I had been out racing, and I had been, driving around, and I had my son with me at one point, and we were driving around in my Mini Cooper and hanging out or whatever, and we got on a conversation about, the car, and I had talked to him about it, and I had said, if you're not interested in that Honda Accord, we can always look and see if we can find something different. So we decided at that time that, kind of look around. Well, it just so happened the next day, I saw a Honda Del Sol pop up on Marketplace, and we had actually talked about, me and Braden had talked about it, that he kind of liked those cars, and I've owned a ton of them. So I've owned, a whole bunch of them. I've owned probably 7 Del Sols from what I remember, and I've owned a ton of different Hondas and Civics and whatnot. So since we had talked about that, that one had popped up, and I was like, oh, maybe this would be something he'd be interested in. I sent him the pictures. He was like, oh yeah, that seems pretty cool. He got super excited about it, and unfortunately had to get let down, because the situation was that the guy that we were going to get it from, my buddy Joe, he had messaged this guy, and basically we had got the deal all settled in. So right now, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and this guy was in York, Nebraska, which is a decent amount of distance. Well, he was supposed to drive down and deliver the car. Well, the day of, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a call from the guy that Joe had been talking to, and he had told me that he couldn't get a hold of his friend with the car. And at that point, I realized that, the Del Sol is actually his friend's car, and he was telling me that he drove from York. This guy drove from York because he was here to pick up his friend after his friend dropped off the Del Sol, and he couldn't get a hold of him. So I was like, well, let me know if you can get a hold of him. I'm going to go to the gym real quick. So about 6:30 rolls around, and I text my friend Joe, and I was like, hey, I think this guy's flaking out. So he got his contact information, and he texted the owner directly, and he said, hey, are you flaking out? So the guy immediately says it's sold. And we're like, what? What do you mean it's sold? And the guy is like, oh, this guy offered me twice as much as you guys did, and I'm just gonna, and I sold it to this guy. And we're both like, so you weren't gonna tell us that you sold this car to somebody else for more money? Like, you weren't even gonna let us know? You didn't even let your friend know that was coming to pick you up? Ridiculous situation. In any case, fast forward to late last week. I saw this ad. So it was actually my friend Joe. He saw this ad for this Civic, and we looked at it, and looking through it, it was like, oh, seems like a pretty good deal. He sent it to me, and I messaged the guy, and I had talked to him about it, and I asked him, a bunch of details about it, and he started telling me about this car, and he didn't have any more pictures of it. All he had was what was online, which was fine. It was just a shell. It was this 95 Civic hatchback race car, just, fully stripped out. There was no interior in it. There's no engine, no transmission, none of that stuff. But he had priced it at $1,200, which nowadays $1,200 is actually a really good price on a clean Civic hatch. And when I was talking to him about this Civic hatch, he explained that, it ran 11.1 at 124. And you could see that in the messages that he said that it ran, this time. And then he also later down in the messages, he had told me that, it's, it made this kind of power and race these cars and it's super fast and all this stuff. And at the time I was like, well, why is this important? I'm thinking, why is this important? Because I'm just buying the shell of the car. I don't really care how fast it went. It doesn't really matter. All I'm buying is a shell of the car. And I had to tell him that, I'm just trying to make this into a street car for my son or whatever. And, we talked about it. And then we set up a time that we were going to go out there. And we were going to leave out at like 3 a.m. and head out to pick up this car, me, my son, and Joe. And we were going to go pick it up. Hey guys, today we're on a road trip. We're road tripping with the trailer about 4 hours away to go pick up a car. Picking up a car for my son, who is, he's turning 16 pretty soon. And the car that I got him, we decided it's not a good fit, so we're gonna go pick something else up. So, yeah. So after we showed up to look at this car, it was in like this, storage facility place, and he had already had the car pulled out, and it was sitting kind of in the middle of the aisle. And he had all these other parts off to the side, which he had said that he had all these extra parts with the car. Walking up to the car, everything looked exactly as he had said. It looked clean. It was fine. The guy, on the other hand, he was a different cat for sure. I don't really know how to explain it. He just seemed sketchy, we'll say. Something seemed wrong, like literally the first second that I talked to this guy, something seemed a little off. And I wasn't really sure what it was. But we start looking at the car, right? So looking at the car, you could see on the interior that it had, there was all this stuff from trees in there, different, like, I don't know, nuts, walnuts, acorns, like grass, I don't know, pine needles, all sorts of stuff in there. And the window was off track, and, there were some random parts in there and just some random seats that were just stuffed in there. And you could just tell looking at this car that it had been sitting outside for a long time. And I even said to my buddy on the way back that, we had said that, hey, this thing really looks like it's been sitting outside for like 2 years with the windows down or something. It just looks like it's been sitting a long time. And the wrap that it had on it, which we both thought it was really cool, that it was a little sun faded. You could tell that, something was going on. Well, originally we knew that it had the quarter panels replaced because it used to be extremely rusty, apparently. Well, the guy had sent us a picture, not of it being rusty, but that he had pictures of it, that the quarter panels were replaced. And looking at it there in person, it looked like they did a pretty good job, except for, the driver's side was off by a little bit, but it wasn't terrible. And I asked the guy while I was sitting there, I said, hey, when were these quarter panels replaced? And he said, I'm not sure. And I was like, okay, do you know when the wrap got put on? I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, how long have you had the car? And right before I had asked this question, he had just gotten done talking about the car and about how it was super fast. And he got done relaying the same information he had texted me, and he was kind of droning on and on about how, it was this fast and it beat all these cars. Well, after I'd asked him this question, he said he hasn't had it that long. And it kind of took me aback for a second, because I was like, why would he tell me that he hasn't had it that long when he's also said he's raced it a whole bunch and this car is full of trees and debris? So right after that, he's showing me all of these parts that, came with the car, all these miscellaneous things. And I kind of looked through them. And then he opens up a drawer and he says, you can have this stuff also. And I looked in there and there's all these wrenches. And when he said that, the first thing that popped in my mind is, why would you just give away wrenches? They're tools. You can use them at any point in your life. It's not something that really goes with a car. It's something that, stays with the person, you would think. Now, he had said something to the effect of he needed to get this car out of this storage facility. Now, he didn't tell me exactly why he had to be out of the storage facility, but he did say something to the effect that he had to get the car gone, he had to get all these parts and all all this stuff out of here, whatever. So I was like, okay, maybe. But at the same time, I was like, you know what? We need to check. In my mind, I'm thinking something sketchy, something weird's going on. So I'm like, do you have the title? Because I originally asked him if he had the title, and he said yes, and that it was a clean title. And I was like, okay, whatever. So he produces the title, and I check it, and it's a North Dakota title. So we're in South Dakota picking up this car, right? And this North Dakota title is titled to one of the previous owners, and it was signed, but it was open. He hadn't signed it. It was, whatever. So I was like, okay, well, that should be okay. And I checked the VIN number on the car. The firewall matches the VIN on the title. The door jamb matches the title and the VIN, and nothing looks out of the ordinary. It looks like it's all been there forever. Doesn't look like it's been cut out and modified, anything like that. The dash has clearly been swapped out. So if you know anything about white EG hatches of that era, they were always blue interior. As far as I know, they always came in blue interior. This one had a black dash in it. So this one, the VIN number doesn't match the title, which isn't a big deal. As long as the other two match, I'm not really concerned about it. Clearly, this car, as far as I can tell, isn't stolen. He's produced me a title that matches this car. So I was like, okay, fine. So me and my buddy Joe, I'm kind of walking around the car and I'm talking to him about this, trying to kind of, beat him down on the price, but I didn't really bring up the price at all. I never really brought up that I was even interested in the car. I was just asking questions and just kind of pointing out flaws just to make sure that he knew that I wasn't as interested as he thinks I am, or at least that's what I wanted him to know. So we've been talking for a little bit. My buddy Joe, he gets a little bit impatient because this guy had been talking so long, and he just blurts out and he's like, okay, what do we need to do here, guys? Like, what is the price? What's the lowest price we can do on this car to make this thing happen today? Like, so we can take this thing home, get it out of your life, whatever. And he kind of hem and hawed or whatever, and he didn't really say anything other than he said that he wanted it to go to a good home, and he wanted to make sure that, it was taken care of or whatever. And we're like, okay. And he's like, make us an offer. Well, in my head, I was like $600. This guy had already dropped the price from $1,200 that originally was on there. And what I forgot to say earlier is that when I was messaging him, if you look in the messages, you can see while I was talking to him in the messages, he dropped the price. I never asked him to drop the price. He just dropped it from $1,200 to $1,000. And me and my friend Joe both thought that was really strange. And he had the listing was unlisted, and he relisted it for $1,000 while we were talking to him. And it was really strange that he would do that. Like, why would he talk himself down and then relist it when we clearly are very, very interested in it. Not really sure why that would happen. So I was thinking 600. Joe jumps the gun and he says 700. Will you take 700? And I was like, you son of a bitch, right? And he goes, nah, how about 800? And so they go back and forth a couple times, training, because Joe's like, 700. And he's like, 800, whatever. So they finally go, okay, 750, which is funny because they're doing the deal and I'm actually the one paying the money. Whatever, it's fine. And so I go to pull out the money. All I had was hundreds on me, okay? And I go to pay this guy, and I'm like, do you have change? I was like, Joe, do you have change? Nobody had change for 100. So I was like, 700 then? And he's like, okay. And I'm like, deal. So this guy talked himself down from 1,200 to 1,000 in the text messages without me asking. Then he was totally okay with just dropping the price, to 800, because that was the price he gave after the 700, and then totally okay with dropping it 700 when I didn't have change. So this guy continuously was dropping the price for whatever reason. Yeah, strange, right? What do we think? Huh? What do we think? Yeah? What do we think, Joe?
I want it. Fuck this guy.
I kind of do too. It's pretty good.
For YouTube or Snapchat?
It's for the YouTube, dude. We're gonna make a new thing. So we had the car loaded up, as you saw, and we made the drive back. So this is just a backstory. It's about 4 hours to drive to South Dakota, where this was at, and back. And it was a long trip, whatever. And we made it back, and no big deal. And we had talked about this whole situation, the whole drive back, about how weird it was. This guy, he just seemed a little shifty, like something was weird. I don't really understand. He kept talking himself down on the price. He kept telling us that he knew things about the car, but then things didn't add up. For instance, at one point, when we were about to load it onto the trailer, I had asked him if the windows rolled up or rolled down, because the driver's window had been off track. And he's like, oh, I don't know. And the door panel was kind of sitting on the door, like not really attached. And I pulled it off real quick, and there was a window crank underneath the door panel because somebody just set it on top of there. And he's like, oh, I didn't even know that was on there. And I'm like, how would you not know that was on there if you know all these things about this car, right? And I go to roll the window down, and the window regulator's all screwed up. And he just acted like he had no idea the window regulator was screwed up. So we had just, we talked about, why was he telling us about all these race stories, and he's only owned it a short time? Why was he trying to talk himself down? None of these things added up. And I mean, getting that car for $700 is insane, because that car is definitely worth quite a bit more. Not to mention he gave us all these other parts. So we were trying to figure out, what is going on. So I was really curious. This car, I mean, obviously it had this wrap on it that said this Myriad Motorsports, and it kind of sounded familiar, but I wasn't really sure. So I looked them up, and I found that it was a race team that they were based in North Dakota, South Dakota, and they also did have stuff in Minnesota and Nebraska. And I was like, okay, maybe that's why I've heard of them. I'm not really sure. So I looked them up on Instagram, and I was like, you know what? I wonder if I scroll back far enough, if I can find this car on there. And sure enough, I scrolled back and I found it back in 2019. And back in 2019, they're talking about how, welcome this car to this team, right? And so clearly, it had been, brought onto this Myriad Motorsports or whatever. And looking through some of the pictures, you could see that that's when the wrap had been put on, or somewhere around that time. So then I also figured out that the owner, this Bryce, he was the original owner of the car when it was, put together as this drag car. So I had talked to him a little bit on Instagram, and we kind of went back and forth, and then and then my buddy Joe messaged him privately, and he had talked to him a little bit here and there, and we come to find out that this guy, this Bryce guy, he had actually sold the car 10 days before we had bought it from this other guy. And we were like, well, that's crazy. Why would he say that he raced this car and did all these things, but yet he bought it 10 days ago? And I mean, that made sense why he didn't know a lot of things about the car, but it doesn't explain why he would lie about it and say that he raced it and did all these things. Because even though in the if you see in the messages, I showed you earlier that he had talked about it just like this car has gone this fast. When we were in person, he actually said that he raced the car and it went this fast and that he blew up the engine or something. Well, this other guy, apparently it sounds like this Bryce guy doesn't even know this person that we bought the car from. And we asked him how much, he had sold the car to this guy for. And he said $2,100. And we said, $2,100? That's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Why would this guy buy this car for $2,100 and then sell it 10 days later for like 3 times less? What? That's insane. Why would you do that? So we asked him, did it have an engine? He asked him, did it have an engine in it? And he said no. And we sent him pictures of it. And he said, well, no, it looks exactly like how you guys got it. So this guy literally bought this car and then just turned around and sold it to us for 3 times less and told us this backstory that was complete horseshit. So we're like, none of this makes sense. So now we have even more questions about everything, and we don't even understand. So this guy Bryce, the original, the owner, when it was put together as a drag car, he starts sending us all these pictures of, when it was back in its heyday, when it was put together, and it looks like it was put together in 2015. He said he showed us a thing and he had picked it up from, I think, an auction or something for $250. I think he said with fees it was like $300 as a, whatever. It was abandoned or something like that. And he had, it was, I guess he really loved the car. He raced the car. He had a single cam in it and he had turboed it, and he raced it, and he said he ran mid-12s with his thing. And then we're starting to see all these pictures and these videos, and we're like, okay, now a lot of these things about the car make sense. It made sense why it had these 2 giant holes in this hood. We were like, well, the pictures that we had seen, the other pictures we had seen were with a B series in it, and it didn't have an up pipe. Well, the single cam, it had the up pipes, and we're like, okay, that checks out. That's what it was. And then he also sent us pictures, that showed that the car without wrap. It had been without wrap for quite a while after he had fixed the quarter panels, because I guess he had done it. And, it actually was painted white under the quarter panels. And we're like, oh, wow, because the whole time we thought maybe it was primered or something, because that's what the guy told us. The guy we bought it from, when I asked him about it, he said it was primered underneath. Clearly, he didn't know anything about it, because this guy is showing me pictures that it's white underneath, and this wrap has been on there, for a very, very long time. And after talking to this guy a little bit more, he had showed us that, he told us that this car had actually been in Omaha, which is where we're from. And it had been sitting under a tree with the windows down for 3 years. Just like I thought it was. I had said that to them, and I was like, okay, now it explains all of the tree, debris and all this crap that's inside the car. I'm like, okay. And it had been sitting without an engine for that long. And it just, all these things are starting to, make sense. And I'm like, okay, it still doesn't make sense about the guy, but the car itself makes sense. And he showed us some pictures that it had a B series in it, and, some B16, and we tried to get him to sell us the valve cover, because we were like, oh, if he had that valve cover, it'd be really cool to put on my son's car and, kind of bring it back to the way it was. And he's thinking about it. We're trying to figure that out. But, he told us that this car's name is Zero, and you know, he loved this car, and that he lives in a van now, and he drives around, and he doesn't have anywhere to put it, and he just couldn't see the car, you know, dying in a field. So, you know, he decided to sell it. So he had it towed from Omaha up to North Dakota, and that's where he sold it to the other guy. And then the plot thickened because we found somebody else we know had towed the car, and they actually told us that it came from Glenwood, which is, you know, it's somewhat close to Omaha, but it's not Omaha. And so that really threw us for a loop also, because we're like, okay, was it in Glenwood or was it in Omaha? And, you know, this guy, he had told us he towed it, you know, yeah, from Glenwood all the way to Fargo, North Dakota. And that's where he dropped it off, which is just, you know, coincidentally, that's where the title is. So it's, you know, it's just, nothing makes sense. So yeah, there's still a lot of things that we're still trying to figure out about this whole deal. You know, we're still not really sure how, you know, it was either in Omaha or it was in Glenwood. We're not really sure, but, you know, we're still talking to him, trying to figure out, you know, exactly the whole story on the car, because it's really interesting to us. We like the story that this guy has said, you know, that he, you know, how much he liked this car, and, you know, we're going to try to do good by it. The other guy that we bought it from, I don't even want to ask the guy more questions, because I think he's just, you know, he's already lied to us so much, you know, you can't really believe anything he said. So I'm not sure why this guy bought this car and then sold it at a loss and gave us these lies. The theories we have right now are that, my first theory was, okay, maybe he lost his job. If he lost his job, maybe he can't afford this, you know, the storage facility, and he had to get it out of there because he can't afford to pay the bill. It doesn't really make any sense to us, because he still lied about the car, saying that it did all these things. And, you know, why would he say these things? We're not really sure. Maybe he just was saying it to feel cool. I don't know. The other, you know, there's a lot of theories running out there, you know, as crazy as maybe this guy killed somebody and he's got to get out of town real quick, or he's made a bet with some guy gone bad and he's got to get out of town real quick. So he's got to sell all his things and make up some bullshit story and get out of town. I'm really not sure. You know, at the moment, basically the plan is we're going to fix this car up and, you know, give it to my son, and maybe we can find out more about this story. I'd love to hear more about the story. It's been such an awesome dive down, you know, this old race car that it's a wild ride. Yeah, we're gonna fix it up for him. The plan right now is we're gonna put an interior in it, make it more of a street car so my son can drive it, and, you know, at some point probably make it fast. We might do an engine swap. The plan is, you know, I'm going to do a whole build series on this. It may be somewhat short because I think it's going to be a pretty straightforward deal, other than the fact that everything is missing. But, you know, Joe, he's got parts cars, and we should be able to, you know, put it together and make something work. So, yeah, I'm excited about this car. Me and Joe, we've been so excited about this car ever since we laid eyes on it, and it's such a fun story. It's great. It just makes me love that car even more. And, you know, I hope that my son treats it nice, and he, you know, does right by this car. But yeah, I think for the moment that's going to be the end of the story. I might do a continuation if I learn some more information about this car. If you know, if you guys have any theories, I'd love to hear them. What the situation is on it. It seems like every day we find out a little bit more about this car, so it's definitely an ongoing deal. But yeah, stay tuned for more videos on this car. And, you know, like I said earlier in the video, if you could like, subscribe, ring that bell, leave me some comments, and yeah, that'll really help the channel along. So until next time, guys, peace out.